Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, November the 11th, 2024. Now, to begin this video, I'm going to be looking at the main events of this week astrologically. So I'm going to be going through them sort of day by day, and I'll be looking at the main events as I see them. Now, there are some big things going on over the course of a week. We've got full moon, we've got Saturn going stationary direct, and having looked at that, I want to move to my, if you like, special topic, which is going to be just a few Democrats, charts of a few Democrats, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and perhaps to consider what's going on in their lives at the moment. Barack Obama is certainly a powerful figure, and I think there is evidence that he is not going away and that he will continue to have a powerful influence, certainly over the Democratic Party, and perhaps longer term he's going to have an influence over the United States as a whole. Just because Trump's won, just because it looks as if the Republicans are going to get the trifecta. I think we still don't know for sure whether they're going to get the House of Representatives, but these things are always temporary, things always change, and perhaps one thing that may always be there might be Barack Obama. He is quite young. He's still in his early 60s, so his influence I don't think is going to go away, and I will be looking at his chart. And having done that, I want to consider the I Ching for the week. So, that's when I cast an I Ching and I make a forecast for the week, and whether or not it has an impact on you, whether you are part of that forecast, well, it kind of depends on whether or not you watch the I Ching section of a video. If you don't watch the I Ching section of this video, then it's not your forecast, you're not part of it. So you've always got that choice. No one ever has to be forced to be part of a forecast. There is that free will there. So you do have a free will not to watch the I Ching section of this video. Anyway, let's look at the main events today. As usual, if you happen to like this video, by any off chance, I would be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed and you like the video, I'd be very happy if you were to subscribe. And yeah, if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Anyway, let's look at what's happening this week. So what we have here is the position of the planets at the very beginning of the week, set for New York, midnight on Monday. So the week starts with the moon in Pisces, and there's a moon in Pisces, sun in Scorpio. That is a reminder that the moon is getting bigger as the week progresses. So it's already pretty visible, but over the course of the week, it gets bigger and bigger, and yes, by Sunday there will be a full moon, which I will be talking a lot about. I mean, not in this video. I'm going to very sort of briefly discuss that full moon. And so that's the broad sort of lunar picture. We've got a waxing moon. Perhaps things are coming to completion. We're perhaps beginning to understand things, and I suppose we're getting a new understanding of the state of the world, and certain fundamental truths are coming home. And as far as the beginning of the week, probably the main event at the beginning of the week is Venus moving into Capricorn. So you can see at midnight on Monday, Venus is at 29 degrees 20 Sagittarius, but over the course of Monday, Venus does move into Capricorn. Okay, it might be into Tuesday, perhaps, if you're in Asia or Australia or New Zealand. That kind of depends. But Venus in Capricorn, I think that is quite important because, for a long time, there hasn't been much Earth in the sky. Okay, the moon has gone into Earth signs every now and then, but it's always been an Earth sign for 3 days or 3 days, and it's just moved out. But now we have got a planet, or a social planet, not just the moon, moving into Capricorn, and it will stay in Capricorn for some time. How long does Venus stay in Capricorn for? So Venus will stay in Capricorn for, I should have worked that out beforehand, but Venus will stay in Capricorn until around December the 7th. So that's a Pearl Harbor Day. So yeah, so Venus will be in Capricorn until December the 7th. And that means that things are going to become more earthy. We finally get some earth in the sky, and it may feel that things are more grounded. People have a greater sense of reality, and maybe financial realities will become more important, and there'll be something that we can have a better understanding of. So that's something we need to consider. And also on Monday, the Sun makes a quincunx to Jupiter. There's the Sun making a quincunx to Jupiter, 150-degree aspect. Sun quincunx Jupiter. There can be a certain excessiveness there, but it is quite a minor aspect. I suppose Sun in Scorpio, we're trying to take things seriously. We're trying to focus on what matters, and there's a distraction, and that distraction might be represented by Jupiter in Gemini. So however serious we try to be, however focused we try to be, something could happen which forces us perhaps to think again. Then we have got Mercury on Tuesday, November the 12th. We've got Mercury making a square to Saturn. So Mercury square Saturn, at a time when Venus has gone into Capricorn, more about reality, serious thinking. Mercury in Sagittarius, has all sorts of ideas. It's sparking with energy, and wants to do lots of different things and say lots of different things. But then it makes a square to Saturn. That perhaps is about reality. Mercury square Saturn can also be quite harsh, verbally harsh. So perhaps on Tuesday around that time we might say things that we later regret. We might sort of lash out with our words, perhaps out of frustration, or it might not be us. It might be someone else. And Mercury continues its path, and by Thursday it's making a semi-square to Pluto. So Mercury semi-square Pluto is the challenge to understand things, and also perhaps the challenge to persuade people. We do need to persuade. We feel we should persuade. Perhaps we feel it's a situation where if we can't persuade them, they'll persuade us. And so sort of on a mental level, there might be a bit of a power struggle, the battle of ideas. Though with Mercury semi-square Pluto, it's often difficult to know which way it's going to work. Pluto can bring things to the surface, but it can also hide things. So Mercury semi-square Pluto, there may be a temptation to keep things to ourselves because it's all too heavy. We never know what might happen if we were to really articulate ourselves. But on the other hand, we may think that we absolutely have to make ourselves seen and heard, and we may have a burning desire to get people to see things our way. So perhaps there's an element of choice there. Are you going to be someone who keeps everything to yourself because you regard the world as being too heavy? Or do you feel that now is the time to really have an influence and to get your ideas out into the open? Now, Friday, November the 15th, a lot of people have been talking about Friday, November the 15th because it's supposedly a very serious day. And the reason you might say it's a serious day is because November the 15th sees a full moon, and it also sees Saturn going stationary direct, and that's certainly something I'm going to be talking a lot about. And I suppose there's a danger that we exaggerate. We might, exaggerate how important that really is. I've been looking at the internet and people thinking about what's going to happen over the course of the month, and indeed into next year. Will Trump survive? Will there be some kind of event that stops him becoming president? Will there be violence and so forth? And it's all a bit. I think it's all a bit overdramatic, really. I mean, some things don't change. Some things have a certain inevitability to them. I mean, as far as Trump is concerned, I suppose it's always possible that he'll drop dead. In the way that it's always possible that anyone will drop dead. But I think if anyone is thinking that there's going to be events so dramatic, for example, that Trump won't be president, some people might just be clutching at straws. I think, yeah, sure, he could die. As I could die. You can look at life tables to look at the probability of a 78-year-old American male dying in the course of a single year. Maybe I will look at life tables, but his chances of dying in a year are going to be pretty low. His chances of dying in two or 3 months are going to be even lower. So I don't think we really want to use astrology to kind of think that he's not going to become president. And anyway, even if he doesn't become president, that just means J.D. Vance is going to become president instead. Does it make any difference? I don't think we want to exaggerate what might happen in America politically over the next few months. But still, Friday does see Saturn stationary retrograde. Saturn stationary direct with that full moon. Saturn will be going stationary direct on, that would be opposition Kamala Harris's Uranus. So it is a difficult time for her, and I think that stationary retrograde is perhaps going to really sort of hit her. Stationary direct Saturn opposition her Uranus could be difficult. Opposition her Uranus, yes. And then at the end of the week, we have got Sun opposition Uranus, and we've also got Mars semi-square Jupiter. So it might be the case that we perhaps need to see Saturn going stationary and the full moon and the Sun opposition Uranus and Mars semi-square Jupiter as perhaps it being all part of the same movement. And so, by the end of the week, I think that tension levels are starting to rise, but that may not just be in America. There are actually other parts of the world. There are other places. I haven't looked at Ukraine for a long time. I need to look at Germany now. Germany, I probably should have looked at Germany in this video, but there are some quite seismic things happening in Germany, and I do want to look at that. So that's just an overview of what's happening this week. I think that the end of a week seems a little bit more hectic than the beginning of the week. So let me now turn to a few Democrats, Joe Biden, for example. So here is Joe Biden's chart, and there is a view that Joe Biden went some way towards sabotaging the Democrats' attempt to win the White House. As soon as they dethroned him from a nomination, that his actions were not useful. For example, I think Nancy Pelosi said that he endorsed Kamala Harris very quickly, and so that meant there wasn't a chance to have an open convention. And then there are a couple of things he said in the campaign, that did somewhat undermine Kamala Harris. For example, he was very supportive of Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. He, in terms of the storm relief, so he sort of contradicted Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris had been critical of Ron DeSantis, and then straight away Joe Biden congratulated Ron DeSantis on his good performance. And then you had the garbage situation where, how did it work? So you had this comedian at the Trump rally who said that Puerto Rico was garbage. Was it a piece of garbage floating in the Caribbean or something like that? Which seemed to be quite bad. The Democrats were using it for all it was worth, and then Biden said that supporters of Trump were garbage. And there's this argument about what did he actually mean. But you could say, when you're talking about a Scorpio, that Scorpio is an emotional sign, and it perhaps at times does work at an unconscious level. And I suppose you could say that Scorpio may become stronger as someone gets very old, as perhaps as they, if it's indeed true, which I suppose it is true, that Biden is experiencing cognitive decline, then that Scorpio part of his personality, that perhaps rather vindictive Scorpio part of his personality, may be coming into the open. His ability to control it may not be so strong. So regardless of what he consciously intended, it was still, there was still a design there, perhaps an unconscious design. And I think that with Scorpios, I suppose with anyone, it's not just Scorpios, but there may be that sense of injustice about how he had been treated so badly, and he just couldn't help himself, that at a deep sort of unconscious level, perhaps he really wanted Kamala to lose. Perhaps he even wanted the Democrats to lose in general. Again, I don't think he necessarily consciously thought that way, but that Scorpio aspect of him couldn't help itself. And of course there is a stereotype of Scorpio, but it is into revenge, and he was perhaps quite unforgiving of what happened. Now, as far as what was happening at the time of the election and what was happening in 2024, I think we mustn't forget Joe Biden's solar return. And I looked at Joe Biden's solar return for 2023. I mean, I did a sort of a whole video on it because it was such a bad solar return. So this is the solar return that he's just finishing up with, because he has his birthday, November the 19th coming up. And so this was the solar return set for November the 19th, 2023. And you can see that it was a really bad solar return. And, he had Moon conjunct the Descendant. You could say the Moon was his enemies. And, most importantly, he had Mars opposition Uranus at the time of his solar return. Uranus was on the midheaven, Mars was on the IC, and the Uranus midheaven midpoint was 23 Aquarius Leo. You can see that, 26 Scorpio, Mars at 26 Scorpio, Uranus at 20 Taurus. So the midpoint would be 23 Leo Aquarius, and so there is 23 Moon 23 Aquarius right on the midpoint, and also right on his descendant. And at the time I looked at that chart and I was sort of thinking more about Ukraine and foreign wars, but I perhaps should have focused on enemies closer home, like maybe like Nancy Pelosi, enemies from his own party. And so the idea of someone losing the nomination, being effectively sidelined as a result of a coup, is certainly shown in that solar return chart. Uranus on the midheaven, Mars on the IC, and Moon on the Descendant, and Moon represents his enemies. And I suppose if you take the Placidus house system, he's got Saturn in the seventh as well. So his enemies were strong, and he perhaps felt he had to get his revenge on his enemies, which I suppose in some respects he did. I mean, okay, Trump was was an enemy, but it wasn't as personal as people like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama, who, as far as he was concerned, they prevented him from running for a second term, and he might also argue that he prevented him from getting a second term. I don't know. I just have a feeling that if Biden had been running instead of Kamala Harris, he would have done better. I think he certainly would have done better in Pennsylvania. I think that I think Biden, because of his being born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, was regarded as Pennsylvania's third senator, and looking at what Pennsylvania Democrats were saying, I think there is this view that Biden would not have treated them like the way Kamala did, and so maybe, who knows? Maybe things would have been different if Biden had run rather than Kamala. But it seems unlikely. But I kind of suspect that Biden would have done better than Kamala, because as we've already discussed, she was a truly terrible candidate. Now, as far as the election is concerned, so what was happening to Biden at the time of the election? Not a huge amount, but I suppose the one thing that really stood out was Mars. So let's look at his chart. There's Joe Biden in the presidential election. Mars. So Mars was at 0 degrees Leo. I think this is really important. It was really important that Mars was at 0 degrees Leo at the time of the election. I think it said so much, and it caused a lot of people problems. And of course, I think that Mars being in Leo in mutual reception to the Sun really did help Donald do so well, because the Sun and Mars are male planets in mutual reception. I think that they certainly helped male candidates. Now, that Mars was, at the time of the election, was exactly square Biden's moon. So I don't know what he was doing at the time of the election. I wonder what he was privately feeling at the time of the election. And that strikes me as there being a certain amount of anger there. And I think he was sort of feeling that anger and perhaps being aware of maybe other people's anger towards him. I suppose you could say Mars square moon would be the angry women in his life. And I suppose one angry woman to consider might be Nancy Pelosi. So Nancy Pelosi, here's her chart. And what I find interesting about Nancy Pelosi's horoscope is her Saturn. So Nancy Pelosi has her Saturn at 0 degrees Taurus. So that means that if you compare Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, so you put Joe Biden in the inner wheel and you put Nancy Pelosi on the outer wheel, there is Nancy Pelosi's Saturn right on Biden's moon. So Mars was conjunct Nancy Pelosi's Saturn at the time of the election, and it was conjunct Joe Biden's moon at the time of the election, and so it was really being triggered. And also Nancy Pelosi's Saturn on Biden's moon, that meant that she closed him down. The moon is very much him. I mean, okay, it's a male chart, so you might say it's more about the Sun, but I think the Sun in Scorpio. But still, that Saturn on his moon. He probably found her really difficult, and in the end, she unseated him. I mean, she was largely responsible for that, for making sure he was off the ticket and forcing him out. And then it didn't matter because they were all losers, because on a day of a presidential election, Mars was hitting Pelosi's Saturn, and it was hitting Biden's moon. one quick mention before I look at Barack Obama, someone who's now in the news a fair amount is Allan Lichtman. So Allan Lichtman was the man who predicted that Kamala Harris was going to win, and Kamala Harris, a fellow Democrat. Lichtman is a supporter of the Democrats. He is not a fan of Trump. So I think that Allan Lichtman certainly had a fair amount of bias there, and he had his 13 keys, and his 13 keys stopped working apparently. Although there is an argument that with his 13 keys that he didn't fully interpret his own 13 keys correctly. For example, one of the keys was a good economy. So if there's a good economy, it supports the incumbent. But if you're dealing with an election, its perception is important, and the point is a lot of Americans did not regard the economy as being good. I mean, Democrat economists might have argued that the economy was good, but as far as voters were concerned, it wasn't particularly good, and that was one of the reasons they voted for Trump. And so maybe he took this thing too literally. You can, with the economy, you look at the numbers. The economy on paper looks good, but in reality, as how ordinary Americans are experiencing it, it is not so good. Perhaps with real wages falling and inflation, it was a problem. But Mars was not just causing problems for Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, but I think to an extent it was causing problems for Lichtman. So Lichtman had his Saturn at. You can see Lichtman has his Saturn at 1 degree Leo. So when Mars moved into Leo, straight away it was making a conjunction to his Saturn, and so that is quite frustrating. So sorry, not a conjunction, I mean a square. So Nancy Pelosi had Saturn opposition. Let's start again. Mars was square Nancy Pelosi's Saturn, but transiting Mars was conjunct Allan Lichtman's Saturn. So it's very frustrating, and it must be very difficult after the election to have to deal with the fact that you got it wrong. Getting it wrong is tough. I'm an astrologer. I know that. And, when you make a prediction, particularly when everyone is talking about your predictions, that is tough. And it may well be existentially tough. So that's Allan Lichtman. And now let's move on to Obama. And here's Barack Obama's chart. Clearly, Barack Obama was having a big role in the campaign, and he was used on numerous occasions, and he, I think, was involved in the unseating of Joe Biden as the Democrat nominee. And I'm not sure whether he really wanted Kamala Harris to be the nominee, but once she was the nominee, he did his best. And Mars was indeed causing Barack Obama a lot of problems at the time of the election. So Barack Obama has his Jupiter at 0 degrees Aquarius, 0 degrees 52 Aquarius. He has Mercury at 2 degrees 20 Leo. Mercury conjunct Black Moon Lilith, you will notice. And so, Mercury opposition Jupiter, in many respects, he was able to use that well. I mean, he's an effective orator. And so just because it's an opposition doesn't mean it's not a good aspect. And he is an effective and indeed inspiring orator. I mean, I suppose whether or not he's inspiring kind of depends on the situation. He was certainly inspiring in 2008, maybe not so much in 2024. And he also had the moon in Gemini. I mean, that's nice. Moon in Gemini, if you are an orator, the moon is about communication. And so moon in Gemini, he is able to express himself very well. But then Mars, at the time of the election, conjunct his Mercury, opposition his Jupiter. You can see the anger there and the annoyance and the frustration that he must have felt. And it would have been interesting to be as a fly on the wall, watching Barack Obama as the election results came in. I wonder how that Mercury-Jupiter opposition worked as he realized that the Democrats were going to lose. So that's his broad chart on election day. But all of this was perhaps foreshadowed by his solar return. And I did look at his solar return at the time of his birthday. So here is his solar return for 2024. And it is a really quite remarkable solar return for 2024. So this is August the 4th, is 2024, and it runs through for the whole year. So we're less than halfway through his year. So this has got until the summer to run. And it is a dramatic solar return. Firstly, we've got Uranus on the ascendant, exactly on the ascendant. I've set this for Hawaii because, you think I'm naive, but I really do think that he was born in Hawaii. I don't think he was born in Indonesia or anywhere else. I mean, by the way, I don't really get this because his mother, even wherever he'd been born, he still would have been eligible to be president, wouldn't he? Because his mother, at the time he was born, was an American citizen. So it wouldn't have mattered. He was always going to be eligible to be president. But I'm not an expert on the American Constitution. Anyway, I'm going to take Hawaii, Honolulu, as his place of birth, not Jakarta or anywhere else. So at that time, with his solar return, Uranus is exactly on the ascendant. That gives us a concept of a shock. This is going to be a dramatic year where things are going to happen that he was not expecting. Also, we have, at the time of his solar return, a exact new moon. It happened exactly on a new moon, and it was exactly on the IC. So with this new moon, with this solar return, we get a sense of shock, but we also get a certain sense of a new beginning, something new, the new moon embedded in the solar return. And it may well be that Barack Obama is perhaps reevaluating his role in politics. Perhaps he thought, well, you pass on to a new generation. Okay, in fact, he's not that much older than Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is 60. I mean, she's nearly as old as me, actually. And Barack Obama, he turned 63. So Barack Obama and Kamala Harris, they're pretty much, they're both in their early 60s. So it's not really passing on to a new generation, but maybe now with Trump winning, he may feel that he's got some role to play, but he has to do something to get America back on the right tracks as he sees it, not necessarily how you see it, but as he sees it. And this is perhaps supported by his solar arc directions. So if we there is let's go back to Barack Obama's chart, and so he's 63 years old, and if we do his solar arc directions, and we put, I did his solar arc directions. Here we are. Okay, so this is, I'm just moving all the planets 63 degrees, and so if we put Barack Obama's chart in the middle and the solar arc directions on the outer wheel, so his solar arc directed midheaven. So his natal midheaven is at 28 Scorpio. But if we move that midheaven 63 degrees, it comes to 0 degrees 18 Aquarius. So what is happening is his solar arc directed midheaven is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. And it was at 0 degrees 18 at the time of the election. So over the next 6 months, year, the midheaven will be moving on to his Jupiter. And this may be a time where Barack Obama feels that he has a new role to play. Again, you might not feel that he is entitled to have this role, but look at the midheaven, and having made that the conjunction with Jupiter, it makes an opposition to Mercury, and then midheaven is making a sextile to his Jupiter in Aries. So this makes me think that over the next couple of years, Barack Obama is going to be very, very busy. And I mean, people on the left have been talking about resistance to Donald Trump, and I would not be surprised if Barack Obama sets himself up as some sort of one of the leaders of a resistance. I mean, that sounds a bit absurd, but it might be behind the scenes. You could say that the midheaven is moving through the 12th house, and he's got Jupiter in the 12th house. So I think that Barack Obama is going to be very busy over the next few years. He's going to be working behind the scenes and doing what he can to make sure that, well, obviously Trump's not going to get re-elected in 2028 because he can't stand, but making sure that the Democrats are not going to, that the Republicans are not going to get re-elected. But it's going to be all to do with the economy anyway, isn't it? Anyway, those are a few thoughts about some Democrats, and now I want to look at the I Ching. So just a reminder, this I Ching reading is for those watching this I Ching section of this video. So if you don't want your I Ching read, you don't have to have it read. You can just, I suppose, stop watching the video, because this is the last section. Anyway, so let's do the I Ching, assuming that you want your I Ching to be read. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday, November the 11th going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And just a reminder that this section is divided into 4 parts. I've got money, career, a general view, then money, then career, and then relationships. Anyway, so this is my I Ching reading for the week ahead. And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 22. And hexagram number 22 is grace. It's about how we appear on the surface, and it's the impression we give, and it can be about adornments and what we look like. And it can be very much connected with style. And so, as we go into the week, I think many of us are going to be trying to avoid sort of deep fundamental issues, and we're going to try to get people onto our side by surface appearances. And it may not just be us, it may be when you watch other people behave, there will be a concern about what we look like on the surface. And the I Ching is saying, to begin with, that is the right approach. We should not be contemplating huge action. We shouldn't be trying too hard to put our individuality at the center of things. We should just being nice and doing what's expected of us, and if possible, trying not to go beyond the surface of things, keeping things at a surface level. The deep stuff, we don't necessarily have to worry about that. Now, we do have a moving line here. The top line moves, and with the top line moving, this gives us the idea of sincerity. We start the week being perhaps focused on surface appearances, and then at some stage we realize that it's all nonsense, that we have to be ourselves, and we have to, all of the ornaments, the affectations, they all disappear. And it's saying that if we want to make progress this week, we have to be genuine, we have to be ourselves. And in the end, substance can triumph over style, or rather, substance should triumph over style. And what matters is not what we look like. It's on the surface. It is fundamentally who we are. And this hexagram, because we've got the top line moves, we move to a second hexagram, and this moves to hexagram number 36, which is darkening of the light. I mean, it sounds a bit grim, but I think with darkening of the light, when we are ourselves, when we are genuine, we perhaps realize that we're not necessarily going to get noticed. We start the week perhaps trying to get noticed, and we try to do things other people's way perhaps, but in the end we realize it's perhaps a waste of time, and we do move into this concept of the darkening of the light. And we can see this if we look at the hexagram. The bottom three lines, the bottom trigram represents the sun, and the top trigram is the receptive. So you have the idea perhaps of the sun going below the horizon, darkening, or I suppose hiding our light under a bushel. There's nothing that we can do, and it just may be a time when, however hard we try, we're not going to get recognized. We can dress nicely, we can say the right words, we can try to fit in, but it's all going to be a waste of time. And so perhaps we should, just accept the situation. And it is temporary, darkening of the light. The light is still there. And it may be that we're in a situation where we are talented, where we should be noticed, but we're not being noticed. And it's just a hexagram for the week. And I think that's how it ends up. And we shouldn't be noticed. If we try to get noticed, if we try to engage with whatever's happening in the world, it's just not going to be satisfactory, and we may actually be making ourselves vulnerable to perhaps attacks from inferior people who just aren't on our wavelength. So again, the darkening of the light seems to be the way to go. Now let's now turn to money. So from a financial perspective, I suppose there is a danger here that we spend money on things that are really quite unnecessary. And this hexagram 22 can be connected with adornments, things that are supposed to make things look more beautiful or more pretty, more attractive, and that's nice, but it's so superficial. And so I think there could be superficial expenditure, or the temptation to spend superficially on things that fundamentally are not needed. We absolutely don't need them at all. So that might not just be about you, it may be about people you know, people in your family, or there may be pressure in this direction. And so if you are buying things, or people want to buy things, I think there's a case for perhaps being a little puritanical, just asking yourself, what is the function of things? Is this really necessary? And I just think that the line of least resistance is to spend money on ornaments which I think in the end are not going to be needed. And I think at some stage this will become clear, because the top line moves, and that's telling us to get down to what matters, strip away the ornaments. And also it's about financial ornaments. There are ornaments perhaps relating to wealth. I suppose you could almost say that an ornament, and a credit card is an ornament in a sense, and a credit card has a spending limit, and that makes you feel good because you've got a high spending limit. But it's nonsense. And so there might be this temptation to spend money on looking good, or to feel that you've got the ability to spend money because you're perhaps being flattered by a financial institution. But with that top line, it's asking you to really look at the fundamental issue. What matters is not the spending limit on your credit card, it's actually how much money you've got in the bank, how much money you've got available to you. And it's just asking you to be very simple about it. And I think that simple and straightforward, and financially, simplicity does really matter. It's all about what you have and spending within your means, and not feeling that you're trying to show off. It may not be you showing off, it may be someone else showing off, showing out how much money they've got and so forth, but you're not going to be impressed. And This hexagram, because we've got top line moves, it transitions to darkening of the light, and darkening of the light sort of indicates that by the end of a week you really need to be quite secretive about your money. It's not a time to be talking about money. It's not a time to be showing off your money or to be giving any indication that you have money. And your own finances, you need to look after them carefully. And I don't think you don't really want to discuss them. And if people ask you questions about your money, then you should, not answer them. I mean, find a way of not answering them. And still, with darkening of the light, there's this indication that there are people around you who are inferior, as the I Ching likes to call it, inferior people. There are inferior people who are perhaps trying to pressurize you to spend money, people who perhaps don't seem to have any financial responsibility, and it's perhaps tempting to engage with them, but the advice is, not to engage with them. You've got things to say, you've got advice to give, but it just feels like maybe that advice is not going to be taken. You can try to persuade someone to be more sensible with money, to have a more responsible approach, but don't be surprised if you're not listened to. Then we have career and business, and with this hexagram 22 grace, it indicates that probably this week not a great deal is going to be achieved. It's more about sort of going through the motions. So, for example, if you have a job, you go into work, you do what you have to do, but are you going to accomplish much? Probably not. It's perhaps just important to just look busy. It's all about how you appear. So, that particularly applies if you're an employee. Just do what's expected of you, appear to be busy, and go through the motions. It's not the substance of your work that will be taken, that will be noticed. It will perhaps be how you spin it, at least to begin with. And so, I mean, it does seem a bit stupid, but that kind of is the way it is. Now, if you run your own business, again, it's how you present your business that matters, rather than actually what the business is and what you are really doing. At least I think that's a picture at the beginning of a week. However, things do change because of that top line moving, and in the end, things do become more serious. There's less emphasis on style, more emphasis on substance. And maybe, I don't know, Wednesday, Thursday, you've got to be clear about who you are, what you can do. That's going to be appreciated. Honesty will be more appreciated. The grand gestures are not going to be appreciated so much, and you can then get a degree of recognition. I mean, I don't think it's a week when you can expect huge amounts of recognition. And then that top line, it moves, and we get to a different hexagram, and we get to hexagram 36, which is the darkening of the light. And I think that by the end of a week, in terms of career and business, it may be very difficult to get noticed. However good you are. And I think there is this concept that actually, in terms of your work, if you are working, you are actually very good at what you're doing, but you may not be recognized. And Greg Winkup, in his translation of I Ching, he actually calls this hexagram not the darkening of the light, but I think he calls it something like the bright pheasant. And the reason he calls it the bright pheasant is because a pheasant represents a bird that is full of colour. In other words, it's full of talent, ability, and it's like the court official who's very clever, very, very able, but is not recognized. And so perhaps you are like the bright pheasant, and so you may feel that you've got so much to offer, but the people above you are just not listening, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, it's not that the situation is entirely bad, it's just the way it is. And next week that things are different, and it may well be the same case if you're in business, or you have your own business. You know you're good at what you do, you're the best perhaps, but still you may not get the recognition that you feel you deserve. But as I said, don't worry. It is just a reading for 1 week, and next week it could be something different. And finally, there is relationships. So relationships, in many respects, are taking place on quite a superficial level with grace. Grace is all about style. It's about what we look like. If you want to impress someone, it's not what you say, it's not who you are, it's what you wear, it's how you present yourself. And yeah, it is very superficial, but that's the world in which you enter the new week with. So if you're trying to impress people at the beginning of a week, if you're trying to get on with people, then just go through the motions. And so, if you're in a relationship and you're trying to get things to work, then I don't think you want to bring anything new to the table, at least in the beginning of a week. Just follow expectations. Just be yourself. Maybe what you wear matters. Just making sure that the usual rituals are done properly and everything is in order. But it might feel a bit superficial, but I suppose the style side of things sometimes matters, and it's not always about substance, whether something really is real. But that is a temporary situation, and the top line does move, and the top line completely changes things. The substance does become important, and so in terms of relationships, there is a change when suddenly you have to focus not on the surface appearances, but actually who you are, and on the fundamental simplicity of who you are. The adornments go, and you are who you are, and it pays to be genuine. And if you are genuine, you will get people's attention, and you can find the right relationship, and relationships can move in the right direction. And that's kind of what's expected of you, and I think it's also what you expect of other people. So perhaps in the end, if you're genuine and honest with other people, they will return the favour. Now, this hexagram grace, it does change, and it moves to hexagram 36, which is the darkening of the light, and it just may be, but by the end of a week, you've done whatever you can in terms of the various relationships in your life. Remember, the relationships can be all sorts of things. They don't have to be romantic relationships. They can be business. They can be friendships. They can be all sorts of things. And with the darkening of the light, it perhaps suggests a certain amount of seclusion. You've done your bit. I don't think relationships by the end of the week are really going to move anywhere particularly exciting, and you may feel that you're not being particularly recognized, or you're not being acknowledged, maybe, but you just know that you've got so much to offer. By the way, you shouldn't feel sad about it. It's someone else's loss, but you have got something to offer. You've got something to offer, and perhaps you should be starting to think about who appreciates you, because some people don't seem to appreciate you, and that's just perhaps giving you some valuable information, and that might sort of set you up nicely for sort of next week. In terms of next week's challenges, that would be the week starting on November the 18th. So November the 18th may see a turn of the tide, and relationships will perhaps start to move in a different direction. One thing about relationships, when we'd be happy, I should say that we've talked about adornment, and we've talked about simplicity and how things change. Venus is moving into Capricorn, and maybe this hexagram, grace moving to darkening of the light, is talking about that. Venus in Capricorn is quite down to earth. In the end, it's down to earth. Venus in Capricorn is about substance rather than style. Perhaps Venus in Sagittarius is all a bit crazy and exciting and going all over the place, but Venus in Capricorn is more down to earth. And so perhaps that's what we're seeing. So as Venus moves through Capricorn, you will move from sort of a grace to darkening of the light, and there comes that point where you are genuine and you are about who you are and what you want, and that's perhaps Venus in Capricorn making itself felt. I mean, the I Ching and astrology are completely different. They're not, one is not dependent on the other. They're just two ways of looking at the same situation. So perhaps you need to think about Venus in Capricorn as a way to further understand what is going on in terms of relationship. Venus in Capricorn is quite a sensible energy. You need to look at people, in terms of who they are, what they've got to offer, and not get too obsessed about surface appearances. Anyway, that's it for the I Ching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, as usual, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.